Thank you very much to you all for joining us for today's webinar on the construction in Ethiopia, key trend and opportunity. Normally, we should have our three panelists with us. Dr. Arega will be joining us within 5 minutes, so don't worry about it. We welcome Mr. David Nyagweta. David, welcome.
Thank you very much about that. I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, David, I'll just straight away start with you with our first question. You know, investment in public infrastructure is a key driver of growth in Ethiopia. For example, you have there the Grand Renaissance Dam, you know, also the Sub-Saharan Africa First Metro was built in Addis Ababa. But the case of the Grand Renaissance Dam is very important to me because, you know, most or a large percentage of the $5 billion used to build the dam, which is the largest in Africa, you know, came from citizens themselves, like a high school student, you know, contributing, you know, as little as $6 more or less, you know. My question now is, should this type of financing, you know, be a trend in Ethiopia or Sub-Saharan Africa in general for large infrastructure investment, not only in dam, you know, but also, you know, for build highway and road, you know, to rely on the citizens themselves? What do you think?
I think that's a very critical question, and I think everyone was surprised about the success with regards to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance. I think it was since 2010 where people were saying that it's sort of like going nowhere, and here we are in, I think, on the 20th of February, they sort of like announced that it's already generating some electricity. So I think that the financing mechanisms, especially I think they also had what they call diaspora bonds, where even people outside of Ethiopia but who are Ethiopian citizens could sort of like chip in and buy bonds, and then that could basically go into the infrastructure project, which I think it can be applied in many African countries, and as we know that many African countries face constraints, and in many instances they have to depend, let's say, on IMF and World Bank, and then those loans come.
Absolutely.
Exactly, they come with certain restrictions to government, and then they have to do structural adjustments, which actually sometimes negatively affect those countries. So I think it's a very good avenue. But I also think that it also has its own flaws. If, for example, you are in a country whereby there's high levels of poverty, for example, there's low income, and then government can for example, be unable to recoup that amount, because I think with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance, there was a portion, I think about 1 billion, that also came from a Chinese bank. Because of particular strategy with regards to that. So I think this could be replicated, but I think there's also need perhaps to create other avenues of financing that do not include, let's say, large institutions such as IMF. So we could have, I think I am excited about the development in like regional banks that are coming up in Africa, or these regional banks, which could perhaps be other avenues whereby it's African institutions, financial institutions, which basically fund this government. So I think there is a little bit of movement there of I would say like a mixture of financing avenues which are localized and not dependent on external institutions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's also an important point. You know, according to evidence, half of corruption cases in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, are related to infrastructure. And most of the infrastructure development in Africa are financed by the public, meaning the government. If you link the two together, it may be good to have for single large infrastructure in Sub-Saharan Africa also to rely on the citizen. The advantage may be that, you know, the civil society will be monitoring, you know, the project themselves, because so many citizens have participated. You know, they feel the project belongs to them, they own it, and therefore they are very much concerned that these things happen, in a much efficient way and successfully. I think it's also good, in my own opinion, in the future, in Africa, if, we have a project like that, that, the citizens contribute significantly, maybe not all, of course, but significantly to the percentage. Okay, my next question to you is concerning the importance of the private sector. There are so many opportunities in the infrastructure sector in Ethiopia. You have, for example, the residential properties for sale that the people can build. You have renewable energy infrastructure. But, like I said earlier on, most investment in infrastructure in Africa are done by government themselves. What can be done to bring in the private sector? For example, insurance company, banks, mining companies to diversify their portfolio and invest in infrastructure. In your own opinion, as an economist, what can be done to encourage the private sector to be more involved?
I think that the major issue, I think, for the private sector, sometimes with private sector, remember they're looking at things such as returns, and they're also looking at, for example, with major infrastructure projects by the government. Most of them are worried about issues such as corruption, so they are worried about whether if I get involved in such a project, will I get my returns? So I think there are other ways that especially states could actually enable the private sector to get involved. So some of the main innovations could be what they call a private or private-public partnership, right? Whereby they invite, let's say, renewable energy companies to come on board, and then they work together, for example, with either government financing or government-backed financing. That is another thing. And another innovation could be subsidies. For example, there are some governments that are offering subsidies. So especially these subsidies are mostly beneficial for companies that like SMEs. Your SMEs might not have the resources, the major resources of financial backing of big companies, right? So I think, like, for example, subsidizing some of the companies so that they could also get involved could also work, because what you find in most African markets, so for example, if you're looking at countries such as South Africa, where there's a drive for renewable energy, we see now that international companies, big companies, are now getting involved, and then the local companies, you see, they lose ground. So I think certain regulations with regards to access for local Ethiopian companies, and certain incentives such as subsidies or government backing could actually sort of like enable companies to get in, and also maybe setting up KPIs whereby you say that these are our goals for this particular project, and these are our indicators. In this particular period, we must achieve this. As a government, we committed that this is going to be achieved. If we don't achieve this particular goal, then there is some kind of penalization or reward for a company that achieves this amount of things in this particular period. So I think those sort of like mechanisms could help in terms of transparency, for example, for those companies that are worried that if I get into this kind of deal, I might lose more money than I've put in. So I think those are different avenues where the private sector could be really involved. And I'm sort of like putting much more importance in local private sector, because I really think that for economies to grow, especially developing countries, we have to include our own local industries within the market. Otherwise, they won't be able to compete with international markets.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because usually the benefit is reinvested within the economy, the local economy, whereas international company repatriate, a big chunk of their profits, so they don't reinvest it in the local economy. In that sense, I think it's also part of the Sustainable Development Goals targets to get involved, local companies in the development process to make it more sustainable. So I agree with you on that. I don't know what Dr. Arega thinks. Are you with us, Doc, already?
Yep, definitely. I'm with you. Sorry for being late. I was attending another policy dialogue forum, and now I'm fully with you.
Yeah, I was asking, Doc, what is your view since you're in Ethiopia? What can be done? Because it's clear that the government cannot build all the infrastructure that Ethiopia needs. David spoke about public-private partnership. What else can be done so that the private sector may get more involved? Maybe banks should start, investing in infrastructure, for example, renewable energy. What, in your own opinion? Because I believe the private sector should be more involved.
Okay, thank you. We all know that this is a time of capitalism on which the private sector do have immense role in the overall economic development of a nation, not only the nation, but across the world. So the government should engage the private sector into the economic, into the many of the economic activity, including constructing, building huge and mega projects. But in actual circumstance, this is not there in Ethiopia and in most parts of Africa. So what's expected from the government to engage to enhance the enrollment of the private sector and to have strong public-private partnership that to support the private sector in connection to availing capital, working capital, because some of the one of the critical problem for our private investors, private entrepreneurs, is the capital shortage. Given this, there should be continuous training for acclimatizing our entrepreneurs, our private business owners to the new technology, recent technologies. We know that the recurrent constructions, recurrent buildings are not built by the technology what we had before 20 years or before 30 years, but our private business owners, they may not have the capacity to adopt and to employ those latest technologies for the construction, for building sector. So the government may be the one which has the power to import those technologies and to avail for the private sector for proper utilization of that. So the government should support the private sectors in availing capital, working capital, in introducing new technologies, in purchasing new technologies, adopting new technologies, and continuous training should be there. At the same time, the rules and regulations should be clear and transparent to enable the an accountable and transparent public-private partnership within the economic system. Besides to this, the working environment should be peaceful. They should be secured enough. We know that in most parts of Africa, including Ethiopia, there are instabilities here and there. So the private sectors, they can't be secured themselves from the instabilities, from displacement or any sort of securities. So this should be the duty of the government to be undertaken. So the private sector should be secured enough in their investment area. So the government should avail and should grant the private sector a security. So these are some of the issues that are expected from the government to be availed for the private sector, and that may enhance the public-private partnership, finally enhance the construction as well as overall economic development of the country, including Ethiopia.
Thank you so much. That was quite insightful. My key takeaway was concerning the government, helping the private sector with capital financing and also making technology available, for them to use, But like you said, definitely the private sector should get involved. I want to continue with you still, Doc, with another important question, which is the government did not, impose strict lockdown during COVID-19. The construction industry, for example, construction industry activities were being carried out in Ethiopia during that time. That's to show the importance of this sector of activity to the GDP of the economy. There are main drivers, the main drivers of growth in Ethiopia. Besides infrastructure, you have export and household spending. Now, what in your view can be done to accelerate diversification of the economy without neglecting the construction sector? Because I believe that it's also important to diversify the economy, maybe through manufacturing more, transforming more, what can be done to diversify more the Ethiopian economy? Because at the moment, the key drivers of growth is infrastructure investment, household spending, and export.
Okay, thank you. We know that Ethiopian economy, especially in some aspects like that of employment, foreign currency securing, or international trade participation, Ethiopian economy highly dependent on the agricultural sector. The agriculture, the prime actor, or the main or the dominant actor in connection to employment opportunity creating, foreign currency securing, international market participation, and that of other circumstances like supplying input for the industries. The agriculture crops, which are very few and that dominate the international market participation of the country. So there should be diversification of these exportable items through enhancing the production of industrialized and manufactured products, because we all know that agricultural products, they do have an elasticity in the production process. At the same time, they are of highly perishable. The elasticity or the demand by the foreign demanders for agricultural product is very inelastic. So the economy should have diversified exportable item, like enhancing or diversifying towards the manufactured products, towards the service sector. So in having that, in diversifying the export participation of the country towards the manufacturing, towards the service sector, the government do have immense role. For instance, the government may be the one with the capacity to avail new technologies for or planting large industries, and then there may be a joint partnership with the government and the private sector, because the private sector, they may not have the required capital to implement, to plant huge industries, to plant huge manufacturing, or to establish a large and tradable service sector. So the government should be there in connection to supporting the firms for producing exportable item, in supplying capital, in supplying technologies. At the same time, regarding to the exports and that of international market participation, the government do have the power to look for markets, because the firms may not have the power to look for market in Europe, market in Asia, market in the US or somewhere else. The government has its own administrative hierarchy, like the ambassadors, so and so on, the councils. This government hierarchy may support the firms to look for additional market source for their products intended to be exported. So the government should support in looking for market, in having a bilateral agreement with among trade partners, and there should be also peaceful interaction, peaceful trade relationship among trade partners, if the government has active enrollment, active engagement in looking for market. And at the same time, the government should support our firms in availing foreign currency. Though the private sectors do have power and do have the role or engagement in securing, in looking for foreign currency, but the government should be also there in supporting the firms to look for additional foreign currencies for our firms. In that regard, our firms may try to produce diversified products, and they may supply those products to the export market. Finally, the export engagement or international trade participation of the country may be more diversified than what is currently be there.
Thank you very much, Doc. Welcome to our third panelist, Mr. Gustave Biraza. Welcome, Gustave. Can Gustave hear me?
I hope he or she is mute. You can unmute. You can unmute.
Okay. Gustave, can you unmute? Welcome. Okay, while Gustave is unmuting, David, I just want to come back to you with the corruption problem. What role can the civil society play? We know, for example, that the civil society can be involved in committee of monitoring and evaluation of state budget, allocated to infrastructure. I believe that, half of corruption case related to infrastructure in Africa is too much. In sub-Saharan Africa is too much. David, in your own opinion, what can be done, to kind of, fight efficiently that corruption problem? David?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think you are right that Africa is there's a major issue of corruption, and sometimes I think corruption is also born out of lack of engagement with, for example, with the government. When the government gets in power, sometimes people get fed up with the government, and then the government is sort of like left to its devices. And I think there needs to be more engagement from the side of citizens, so that they sort of like put more pressure on politicians, on public officials, so that they sort of follow in line. I think that is a major issue in African economies. Is that people just get fed up, and they for example, they don't see the reason of why they should vote, especially for the youth. I think, especially in my case, I do realize that as the youth, sometimes we sort of like undercut the role of voting in terms of government. So I think some governments are very comfortable where they are, based on those issues whereby the citizens are not taking them to account, and they only sort of like react when you get a situation such as in Sri Lanka, for example, when there's now a large wave of citizens sort of like protesting overall. So I think they need to be more engagement on the side of citizens. Citizens need to pressure their whether it's their councillor, whether it's the president, and also they need to also make sure that their voice is heard to the voting booth. So I always think that in many instances in Africa, we do see that they are major parties. So those parties are sort of like the boon on long-term political office, right? You've got people who are in political office for 10 to 30 years, and people do not sort of like vote them out. So I think there is a major issue with regards to that in terms of our democracy, where we really need to make sure that in 5 years, if public officials do not change the trajectory of a country, then they need to be removed at the voting booth. So I think that is a way in which we could change our trajectory. I think I've seen something new in terms of, I think it's Zambia that recently changed their president after so many years of having another party. So now that there's an opposition party, there is some growth in advancement in the country. So I think that is a country whereby people in Africa could actually take some advice or learn something, that you could change your government, you can change your government, and you can change your trajectory by pressuring your government, and by giving them a social contract whereby if they don't meet the needs that you're asking for, or the development goals that you're asking for, then you simply switch to different parties. But I think the most important thing is citizen engagement. That is very important, that citizens are engaged in different, whether it's indabas, for example, in South Africa, they call them these national indabas, where when, for example, if the government is sort of like a developmental policy, it invites citizens, but then you find out that many citizens do not get to those indabas, so they don't get to even aid on policy. So I think that exchange is very very critical, and many citizens do not partake in those initiatives. So they end up giving the power to certain people who've got access to those indabas to sort of like make the policies for them. So I think those are different avenues that we can go through as Africa.
Absolutely. I think one other way is that in some countries in Africa, infrastructure budget, there are two committees at least that look over it, three. One is the ministerial committee, made up of ministers involved in the specific project. Another one is a technical committee made of experts. And the third one is a parliamentary committee. The problem is that the civil society is not permanent member within those committees. They may be invited, but they are not permanent. I think in addition to what you have said, which is true, the power of vote, to own the destiny of your country is also to make the civil society permanent members in those committees, so that at least they can be there listening to what's going on, where the money is going, if the work is being carried out effectively on the ground, regarding those infrastructure. Anyway, thank you very much for your input. I'm not sure whether Gustave is there with us already. Gustave, are you there? Welcome.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Gustave, and welcome to this webinar.
Yes, thank you very much. Since I'm still moving, I'm sorry. You may pass the the time for someone else. I will intervene in 15 minutes.
No problem. That's
to get some stable
okay.
internet. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Doc, I'll be coming back to you. The government capital expenditure for fiscal year 2020, 2021 in Ethiopia was about $4.6 billion. Again, that's a lot of money that, if used properly, might definitely help. What can be done to enhance the performance of the construction industry in a sustainable way, besides fighting corruption? What else can be done so that such money, 4.6 billion, be efficiently used in a sustainable way? What do you think can be done?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think you're very right. If that amount of money is used properly, it can bring a lot of change on the continent in terms of infrastructure, in terms of trade. Now that we are talking about the continental free trade area, you cannot trade without the infrastructure. That's for sure. But yes, what should be done? The political will of the decision makers need to keep their promises that they promise to their people. And otherwise, the implementers are there. The private sector is there to help. But of course, first of all, the core of everything is the political will and the good governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree with you on that. As regards the political will, which is very important, and also good governance can help a long way, in terms of producing the expected result of quality service to the user. I just want to bounce back to another thing that happened in Ethiopia. I don't see in in many African countries, which is a good thing, industrial park. Just can you tell us more about it? Who financed the industrial park? Is it beneficial to the economy? What can other African countries learn from the Ethiopian models of industrial park? Because of industrial park, Ethiopia has been assimilated to the China of Africa because of the way it's trying to replicate its own development. So I want you, Doc, to kind of tell us more about industrial park and what can other African countries learn from the Ethiopian experience.
Thank you for your question. I hope this is a modified version and a model adopted by Ethiopian government from the Southeast Asian countries, and constructing industrial park here and there has its own advantage. One is to avail every facility for our firms. For instance, the facility of electric power, water, transport, and a warehouse, such and such a type of facility could be fulfilled, and the only thing what's expected from firms or entrepreneurs or investors is to come up with their machinery and to plant the machinery in the compound. So everything is full-fledged and the environment is very comfortable for our firms. So making comfortable for the working environment is the main target of building industrial parks. At the same time, it has an environmental friendlyship, because some of the industrial parks, they try to consider the environmental situation, and the byproduct intended to be released from the industries, from the manufacturing, could be absorbed and could be managed properly if they are within the industrial park. This is the second benefit, that is environmental friendly manufacturing or industry sector could be built. The other one is to have easy access for market. Many of the industrial parks constructed near to the large towns and to the capital of the country. In that regard, the firms may do have easy access for market. Since they are near to the capital of the country, near to large towns within the country. At the same time, this is the third benefit. The fourth one, some of the industrial parks constructed near to areas with plenty of input or supply of availability of input for the firms. So if you come up with an industry that may use vegetables or fruit products, fruits as an input, our government may direct you to southeast part of Ethiopia. If you bring an industrial park that use cereals as an input, our government will direct you to the northwestern part of the country, where you can have easy access for that input, and there are industrial parks there. So these are some of the advantages of building industrial parks within the economic system. So it can attract foreign direct investment at the same time. If there are full-fledged and well-established facilities for our firms, for our investors, so the foreign direct investment or FDI flow could be enhanced. So these are the advantage, and this can be the lesson what other African countries can take from Ethiopian governments.
Thank you very much, Doc. That was so insightful. I just want to ask my next question to you, David, concerning residential property, residential estate. I know in South Africa, I'll tell you why I'm coming to you. It's because I know in South Africa, for example, to develop a real estate, for example, in Ethiopia or in South Africa, the insurance companies are very much involved, like the Discovery, Sanlam, all of those insurance companies will invest a lot of their cash to develop real estate. And then, you know, what can be done, in your view, David, so that Ethiopia can copy that kind of model? You know, it's good that the government invests in infrastructure, for example, in a road, right? But I believe that the private sector should get involved one way or another. One way is through the real estate. David, speak us about the South Africa experience. What can Ethiopia learn from it in order to you know, encourage insurance company or banks, which are in liquidity, you know, they have money, they don't do anything with it, to invest in real estate so that people can become owners of property. This too can help the economy in terms of collaterals, because small and medium-sized enterprises can use that property they own as a collateral to acquire capital or loan that they can use to scale up their business. And you know, banks usually ask property as collateral a great deal. So, David, what can you say about it?
Yes, I think that's really true. South Africa is some of the major development in terms of real estate. I think one, especially in big cities, in major cities, if you look at, for example, Cape Town, Johannesburg. So I think one of the major benefits with regards to the South African economy is the strong property rights. So banks, whether it's banks or insurance company, when they invest in these mega developments, they do know that at least my buildings are safe. The government is not necessarily going to do any major issues to it. And I think another extra benefit is that the real estate in South Africa is really beneficial for banks and also for investors, right? So they're getting a lot of return from it because of where the infrastructure is sort of like located, sort of like big cities. Everyone knows that, for example, Cape Town, it's sort of like the boon of tourism, for example. They know that tourists are going to come in because tourists want to go to, like, they want to view Table Mountain and all those sort of like particular areas. So I think what other African countries need to learn, I think it's a question of, firstly, stability. You need to ensure that your economy is stable enough and you've got strong enough property rights that if someone comes in and says, if an insurance company or a bank comes in and they say they want to do this mega project, if they see that there is instability in your economy, so I think like Ethiopia has also been having an issue with that. I'm sure I think Doc can add on that. I think in Ethiopia you also see that most of the real estate, I think it's also located in. I think that is another deficiency in South Africa that a lot of other African countries need to learn, is that if you look at South Africa, the mega real estate developments are in those major cities, but then they are not moving into other undeveloped areas, which I think there's sort of like a major benefit that we could get from developing outside areas. So if you go to Ethiopia, the assumption is that probably Addis is the sort of like the boon of real estate. That's where the real estate is, since it's the capital city of Africa, right? But then it's not spreading to other cities. So I think that is also an avenue that even governments should learn, that if they improve the infrastructure in those what would you call it uncharted areas, you see, that if they improve infrastructure, whether it's roads, build businesses, in whichever way they want to develop those cities, then I think that there will be more insurance companies, more banks willing to build mega malls, mega flats, those kind of things in those cities. So I think that is a major development that other countries could also learn, to say that, okay, the South African economy, it's, in terms of real estate, there's large investment in these mega cities, but then there's also areas where the government is sort of like neglected, which is areas that remain underdeveloped. If you look at, for example, in South Africa, with areas like the Eastern Cape, where I am right now, where it's very underdeveloped, where and yet there's so much potential for the government to chip in and build infrastructure. And then with that, it also invites the private sector to say, okay, I see a lot of developments, I see a lot of roads, I see a lot of bridges, and I see a lot of people moving to these cities because they see the development. So I can also build a major flat building, for example, or I could also build a mega mall where people can buy goods and services. So I think those are certain areas that we should really look at when we apply that to, let's say, Ethiopia, for example.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Thank you, David, for your insight. My key takeaway from what you have said is that we definitely need a strong private ownership of property. And I think you're right, the law, because the evidence will suggest that in the world, during the last 500 years, countries would tend to develop faster are those who have a strong private ownership of property. Therefore, my question to Doc or Gustave, I don't know whether Gustave is back with us yet. Gustave, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you, but still struggling with the internet somehow, but I think you can hear me somehow.
Yeah, I can hear you. Gustave, I just want to know, in your view, like I said, having a strong private ownership of property, making easier for people to acquire property, private individual, can also help a country develop. Like I said, evidence suggests that during the last 500 years, a country in the world who are developing faster, those who have a strong private ownership of property. What can be done in Ethiopia in terms of, strengthening the private ownership of property, in your view?
Yes, thank you. I think what you really just said is absolutely true. Having a right of property can not only encourage people to, participate in the development of the infrastructure and even at the agriculture sector, as I overheard the doctor saying that. It's a very important thing. But moreover, however, I think in Ethiopia, regardless that difference of ownership of property, I can say that the infrastructure of this country is really at a good trend. if someone may recall, maybe the period of before 2010, the infrastructures were not as they are today, and you can see every day improvement on a project. And moreover, the national infrastructures, what I can call national infrastructure or project at national level, they keep going regardless the change of government or the change of there is a national program that continues. So I think that one is also something that we should focus on in the potentiality of this country. Yes, they need to be improvement of the ownership of properties, but if someone looks at the angle of the national project, mega project, we can, for example, say then the Renaissance Dam, the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam, which is a national project, which is not only a national project, but continental project. But as I said, the colleague, they are saying, yes, the infrastructures, the mega buildings, most of them are also private sectors owners. Those are individuals owning those hotels, those big buildings. I think they just need to be improvement, but I think they are on a good trend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to carry on to say that I believe once again that the private sector should get involved more. As regard public-private partnership, how developed are they in Ethiopia? Gustave, I'm still with you.
Sorry, come back to the question, please.
As regard public-private partnership, because that's the best way also to, like David said, to get involved the private sector. Why are we not seeing more of the public-private partnership in Ethiopia, and what can be done that we can see more of that?
Yes, I agree with you. It's absolutely true that the private sector participation level is quite still needs some improvement to be done. But however, for example, I can say that something is being done. For example, if you see in the ICT infrastructures in the ICT sector that the country is opening slowly to Safaricom to help the ICT project to develop. So the private sector is being engaged at yes, at a certain level. And if you recall past 30, 40 years, maybe it wasn't like this. So let's hope that things will keep improving to, to integrate all those private sectors.
Thank you very much. Doc, just still to the public-private partnership, what in your view can be done, through that vehicle to get more involved the private sector? What do you say can be done in your own opinion? Dr. Arega?
Yes, in my opinion, I think it all depends on the political will and the political orientation of the country to, first of all, notify that the private sector is very important for the development of a nation. Yes, for me, I could just say that the political will needed to be engaged, but also the private sector need to pressure, show their interest to to help the government, the nation to get interested in engaging them.
Thank you very much. David, the public-private partnership is quite strong in South Africa. For example, you have the Gautrain, which is quite a big success. The Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, you can see that the citizen was the main driving force. They invested a lot in that. What in South Africa works in the public-private partnership that, in your view, David, Ethiopia can learn from as a fellow African country?
Yeah, so I think what Ethiopia can learn from South Africa, I think the success of the public partnerships in South Africa have mainly come out of they already had like a strong private sector. So they've had companies that were sort of like been there for like 20, 30 years, and these companies were some of them were born out of the public partnerships in major projects. So I think the issue on the Ethiopian side is that there might be lack of engagement between the public, the public sector and the private sector. So I think there needs to be more engagement. In South Africa, for example, you've got things such as bidding, or they've got the tender system. Okay, it does have its own issues there, which we I think which has to do with corruption and inefficiencies. But then I think those kind of mechanisms could work for Ethiopia in terms of, for example, they could do certain bidding, for example, with renewable energy. What South Africa is now doing, it's the IPP is bidding. You see the bidding for companies to come on the board and say, okay, we can supply this amount of electricity. This is the benefit that we have. And then they supply the electricity to government, and then maybe government also helps with regards to investment in those companies. And then with regards to general services, there's this tender system which also includes benefit, but bidding, which also has its inefficiency. But I think I have to just make a critical point that I like about Ethiopia, especially with regards to the dam. What I like about Ethiopia is the inclusion of citizens overall. Because in South Africa, yes, in South Africa you've got major inequalities because big companies are the ones that benefit the most. Because if you look at South Africa, it's one of the unequal countries in the world. But in Ethiopia, here's a country that is going to the citizens. Citizens are for me, citizens are part of the private. They are part of the public, but they're also the private sector in a way. Their public sector and private sector. So yeah, you've got a system whereby citizens as individuals could come and say, I want to buy a bond for building this bridge. And then in 5 years, 7 years, I'm going to get 7%, 4% interest out of it. I'm getting return, yet at the same time, I'm also getting electricity. You see what I mean? So I think Ethiopia has something that also South Africa itself can learn from, given the huge inequality.
Absolutely. I like your intervention, because that actually was my first question, if you recall, when I said that should this type of financing, like the way Ethiopia has successfully done, be used, by other African countries for large infrastructure projects? Because getting involved with citizens is also one way to make sure that corruption, is being the citizens are looking so that the money is not embezzled, because citizens put their money in. There's a stronger incentive for the civil society to get involved. So that's why I was asking my first question before Doc and Gustave get in, that should this be a trend in Africa? Should we have large infrastructure to fight corruption by getting involved in civil society? Now I'll ask the question to Gustave and Doc if they want to answer. Gustave first.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I was asking if we this should be a trend for large infrastructure in Africa to get involved citizens, that they can contribute small amount of money, to make sure that the civil society get involved in looking after the project.
Yes,
one way to fight against corruption.
Yes, it's absolutely true. It's one way. It's even a better way of helping the citizens, the Africans, to themselves take care of their own infrastructures. But we also needed to admit that the continent entirely, the African continent, we are at a level that we are not yet at that stage. Yet, of course, we are progressing. You can see that African countries like South Africa, like if you go in Maghreb, in West Africa, Senegal, and so on, countries are really progressing in terms of, yes, I can say infrastructure or all the sectors. And you can also recall that there are so many continental projects together that area mentioned, like the Africa Free Trade Area, Continental Free Trade Area. All those things, yes, we are progressing, but we need to admit that comparing to other parts of the world, Africa still needs some steps to reach where we are. Yes, we should involve our citizens. We should involve the Africans to participate in those. Yes, first of all, we need to empower the people. Do people have the capacity of participating? does the education level of our continent citizens reach the, the level of getting interested in, we are still living in that mindset of continental, I can call it a sleep, deep sleep of thinking that the government should do everything on behalf of the citizen. People are not participating enough, but we should admit that, yes, steps are being taken ahead, but we are still a bit delaying to reach that level.
Okay, thank you very much. Doctor, you want to add something before I conclude? About the same question, whether it should be a key trend or whether African countries should copy that model to fight as a way of fighting corruption in infrastructure investment. Dr. Arega? Maybe Doc is not with us anymore. Just want to, for our listener, some key points that were discussed during this webinar. I don't know, David, are you listening to me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to mention some key points that we discussed. My key takeaway that there should be more political will, increase good governance, the construction sector to make use of the technology, and also should strengthen the private ownership of property. Private ownership of property should be strengthened. The civil society should get more involved. Another important key takeaway was more engagement between the public and the private sector. Guys, I just want to say thank you so much for all of you, Dr. Arega, Mr. Biraza, Gustave, and David Nyagweta for your time. We came to the end of this webinar. It was quite insightful for me. I hope you enjoyed too. Thank you so much, guys, and see you. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye.